This podcast covers a murder that occurred in 1983. It is a true story, and while I have relied heavily on police reports and public documents, the opinions of the host and interviewees are simply that, opinions, not facts. The credibility of the witnesses and what they say is to be determined by the listener. Everyone is presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. A snapshot of Reed City, Michigan in 1983 looks very much like any small town in the Northeast, with its main street, in this case called Upton Street, lined on both sides with businesses. They all have the same general shape and layout. Long, deep spaces with basements, most with a second floor that at one time would have been the living quarters of the shopkeepers. In 1983, some of those second levels, the ones that hadn't succumbed to fire like the buckboard, were still apartments that people rented out. Some were being used as storage, and others had been converted into other business spaces. The front of the Gamble store is all glass with a door in the center, so you could see all the way into the store from outside. When you open the door under the large Gamble sign, you enter an establishment that carries everything from tire irons to kids' bikes on their long aisles of tall shelving that ran from front to back. You could pick up a car battery at Gamble's or plant spikes. Such was the range of items being sold there in 1983. If your reason for being in the store was something for your pet gerbil or fish or bird, you would be headed down to the downstairs pet department, which was set up by the owners, Dave and Bonnie Ingalls. It also contained hobby items like model cars and craft items. There was even a sign in the front shop window that said, "Pet and Hobby Shop in Basement," although the word hobby was spelled Hobbie. The Gamble store itself was essentially two stores that had been made into one by an expansion. Doorways were cut into the original Gamble side on the street level, as well as the basement. The owners had purchased what had previously been an establishment called the Men's Store, which dealt in, well, exactly what it sounds like, apparel for men. Gamble's had one front exit and two back exits in 1983. One of the exits was on the Gamble side, and the other was on the old Men's Store side, where they would accept incoming deliveries. There was no exit to the outside from the basement. You would have to ascend one of two sets of stairs, and only one of those was readily known to customers, although anyone familiar with the old men's store would have known there would have to have been a set of stairs on that side that led to access their basement. And a lot of these stores had basically the same setup. Gamble's also had an upstairs office that was lined with windows on the street-facing side, so anyone up there in the office could see down into the front section of the store and out onto the main street. From the Michigan State Police report. The basement of the original Gamble store, 114 West Upton, is now used as a pet shop with display area for animals, birds, and fish. All money sales, with the exception of the pet shop, are transacted upstairs on the 114 West Upton side of the store, with two cash registers located on this side. One is in the middle of the store floor area, near where the main entrance and exit of the pet shop is, and the other being toward the front or street entrance, southward from the first mentioned register. Essentially, to get to the pet shop, after entering the front door, you'd walk about half to two-thirds of the way through the original Gamble side, and the stair access would be on your right, next to the register in the middle of the store. The staircase itself is 4 or 5 steps down initially, and then a hard right turn, where the stairs descend the rest of the way into the basement. For the purposes of clarity, if you were standing at the bottom of those stairs, looking into the length of the pet shop, once you were down in the basement, you would essentially be looking toward what would be the front of the store, directionally speaking, because you've made a basic U-turn in getting down there in the first place. The size of the basement pet department was generally about 2/3 the length of the full Gamble store above, give or take. It was dark downstairs by all accounts, at least near the back of the pet store, to take advantage of the whole right section of wall that had been lit from within by the fish tanks built into the walls. The back wall had tanks for small animals, and similarly, the left wall in that back area, which today is a hollowed-out shell that formerly contained a display area, had a section of cages for birds, if I'm to believe the recollections of multiple customer accounts. What I was struck by when I visited the basement with my sister, and I've been back there a couple times now, was that there's still a lot of pet paraphernalia back there. Old tanks with that gerbil-type bedding, old empty fish tanks in the walls, where you can see through into the back room where Janette was found.
Okay, I'm in this, it's Halloween and I'm going to my child's school today, but we came to ask questions today, so I'm just going to quickly tell you what we're doing and then we're going to narrate the whole room for you. This is the set of stairs that I came down that was in, was it Reese? Was it in the center of the, it was in the center of the room, of the hardware store, and behind it and above it was the office that you could see out from, right? Did you see that big window, like a big office that was above? Okay, so we walked down these stairs. See, notice this sign, pets?
It's clear that the owners tried to make a go of it after the murder, because changes have been made down there. In fact, one of the changes, when I spoke to a former employee, was that they put locks on the back room doors and caged in a little area so that when they went back into the back room, they could lock themselves in and out. Can you imagine being so scared at the place where you worked that you would feel like you had to lock yourself in and out of the back room?
All right, fan hanging up. I don't know if that was there at the time. So I'm guessing this was where the register was, where they would pay.
From everyone that I've spoken to, it was just too creepy for many customers to ever return.
But this is a room that is connected to it, and it goes up another exit into the hardware store. Notice the poured out rock right there. So that's how thick that was. But we can hear stuff from upstairs absolutely walking around as we're here. So we can absolutely hear.
Every footfall.
Yeah.
As with most small-town businesses, there weren't many employees in 1983, and Gamble's was no exception. There were Dave and Bonnie Ingalls, the owner and his wife, John Ingalls, Dave's brother, who is listed in the police report as being the manager, and two older ladies that were store clerks named Flossie and Angie. And then there was a man named David Sandlin who worked part-time, according to his wife, on truck delivery days. Today there are actually 3 different access points to the back room that ran like an upside-down L shape behind the pet store. On the right-hand side, it's just like a long hallway where the boiler is that leads up to the bottom part of the upside-down L, which is essentially just a small area behind the pet department where the tanks could be accessed, where there's a sink where she could feed and water the birds and other animals, and where all the essential supplies for the pet store could have been kept.
What I didn't realize is that this whole section behind all this and behind all that in an L shape is, I assume, the storage room they're talking about. And someone could have come, this is an access by a door, you see? So the customers would only probably be privy to one big open space, but back here there's a whole other section. We're going to come back here and show you. Behind the fish tanks are all behind here. This is where they would access those. Wow, look how deep that goes. We didn't even check back there.
It goes the whole length.
The whole length. It's very far. All the way back behind you, whatever. Oh, God, I don't like being back here. This is a heater or whatever. So,
Yeah, the big silver thing is a heater, and then to the right of it is a tunnel that goes all the way down.
Okay, what's down there?
Is there a light on?
Do you see a light for this room anywhere?
There's a light bulb right above your head. So I don't know where the fixture would turn on.
Oh.
Here, let me see if I can get in there. It looks like there's some light in there.
Go down there. Just go straight down. I'm scared to go down there.
All right, here, you hold this.
I'll hold the camera. Okay, this is directly behind this is my sister, she's in a zombie costume.
The only reason I want to check it out is because you can see through all these tanks to the back.
Yes.
I wouldn't think anybody would do anything where they could be seen.
Right. That would be a place, but I think that's not where they found her. But they could have done something back there, that's the thing. What are you doing? Oh. She's getting ready to walk straight back. Now this would be heading back toward this, parallel with the stairs, where we came in.
See any of this?
Huh? Yeah, you could do it. Yep, go ahead. I'm going to go behind you. We're walking straight
here's
back.
Your boiler.
Okay, there's the boiler.
Number 2 sectional boiler. So
Okay.
it's the old school coal boiler.
Okay, we're just going to walk straight back. I'll walk back if I'm behind you. I'm going to give you a little bit of...
It looks like all boxes and glass.
Yeah.
This is where are we facing the front of the store or the side of the store?
We are facing the back now. We're facing the back right now. He's behind us at the front door.
That's the front
Yes.
door. That's the back door.
Okay,
This is
what's
the
back
side.
here and how much room? Because this would be...
This goes all the way back.
And is it straight? Tell me what's at the end of it. Because I can't really get any film back here. There's not enough light. Just go directly back and tell me if there's any doors, if there's any way to get out or in. And for whoever's watching this, just bear in mind that this is where we are. That's the main room out there. What?
Comes right out where the cash register used to be in the phone. It's now ringing.
The phone's ringing? Oh, I'm sorry. That's creepy. Okay. It's attached to the downstairs one probably. That's why. But the phone that she would have answered just is ringing right now. That's creepy. So this is... She would come back here behind the... Wait a minute. There's a door behind the register. I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's the one that had the pet sign on it that you looked in and said was a little storage room.
Okay, we'll go in it on the way back.
This connects to it.
Okay, we'll go in it on the way back. But basically, back here is a lot of place where something could have happened that nobody would have seen, but not heard. I can hear everything that's going on upstairs. All right, go ahead and I'm gonna go back straight again. I just want to show them where we're at and re-show them. So this is that whole back area that runs the length of it. And then there's also, I don't know if this was birds at the time because we've got coop stuff here, but this is where she was found, I assume, because this is directly beneath the front door. And they said that she was found in a storage room back beneath the front door. So I'm pretty sure this is where it was. Also, because we know about the coal chutes, we don't know if those coal chutes were covered in. We're going to find out by then. But this is where the coal chute would have been filled in at some point, where the person would have had access to go out there and up and down a row outside under the cement and get back and forth from other businesses. But like I said, we're not sure if that was closed in at that time, and we need to find out because we've got different sets of wall. Reese, check this wall out. That looks like that's styrofoam over top of
Concrete block.
But the concrete's different, Reese. That's brick.
And that's a slab, like a firewall. So that might have been where it was open.
Right. So that's where it might have been. And then this right
And then we've
here.
got the same material they used right outside, which is where I think was completely open down here. I think this is where the coal chute was.
Right.
Janette was the clerk in the pet department. She and her husband had moved to Reed City about 2.5 years earlier from Georgia. Her mother, Marion Fisher, was the city clerk and treasurer at the time. After they arrived, Janette had worked briefly at a place called Nartron from October 7th of 1981 through December 7th of that same year. Only a couple months, but enough that after the murder happened, her brief employment there would play into one of the many conspiracy theories surrounding this case. We'll get to that in future episodes, because there's quite a few of those. But for now, it's January 19th, 1983. It's a fairly mild winter day, and she's been working in the Gamble's pet department for a while now. She'd been laid off from Nartron, but when they had called her back in August of 1982, she had already found her new job, one that, by all accounts, she really liked. Sweet, angelic, always kind. This is generally how Janette was described by the store patrons and folks who knew her. A tiny blonde gal who loved animals so much, I'm told that she once refused to sell a bird to a young local teen because she knew he played his music too loud, and she was afraid it would be off-putting to the bird.
So this is that door that leads back to that whole long tunnel that runs along the back of this cash register all the way down through a big L shape to where she was found.
Here's an excerpt from a letter she had written to her father right around this time. I haven't done anything this morning. Got a guitar lesson after Mama leaves after lunch, so I'd better go over that. Okay, that's over and done with. At least I did practice this week. The piece I'm learning is my 59th lesson, and it's called Say It With Music, adapted from Tchaikovsky's Fifth Second Movement. Bud, the maintenance man, is clearing the snow out of the courtyard outside the kitchen window. He cleared most of it with his truck. Now he's going back over it with a miniature snowplow deal. It looks like a lawnmower tractor with a cab on top and a cute little snowplow in front. It looks so funny. I am sleepy. I'm going to bed early tonight. That's what I always say. I know I'm going to yawn all the way through my lesson, and Mr. Truman will think that I think he's boring. Oh well. Guitar lesson wasn't bad. Mr. Truman wants me to study Hawaiian guitar when I'm through with flat top. Did I tell you my guitar broke? It just sort of started to fold up. The neck came loose from the body and the bridge came unglued. Mr. Truman couldn't keep it in tune, so I couldn't play it. I felt pretty bad when he showed me where it was breaking, 'cause you can't play a broken guitar. He drove me over to Claire to look at some new ones, and he bought one for me and told me I could pay him back $5 a week. It's a concert size like my other one, but it has an adjustable neck. I even got a case with it. It's not a fancy name, not a Gibson or a Fender. They had a Fender electric guitar, but they said they had to have $525 for it. They said it was a $900 guitar. That's not including the amplifier or case. Did I tell you I have a little bluegill? A lady came down to the pet store with it and wanted to feed the turtle. The turtle couldn't catch it, and the boss said I had to get it out of the store because it was illegal for pet stores to have them. So I took him home and I set up a 10-gallon tank for him. I haven't seen him eat yet, and I've had him about a week. I'm feeding him dried shrimp pellets, dried mosquito larvae, and dried flies. I started feeding him frozen beef heart, but he didn't eat it, and it smelled up the tank. I know he'd like some worms, but I can't find any. He's only 3 inches long. In the spring, I'm going to turn him loose. Well, I gave away 3 male gerbils and got that little black and white one from Tiffany. Everyone here is fine. Alvin is laid off from work for a week, but we're doing good. I made a little extra last week because I worked an extra day, and that helped. I really like my job. The boss is a little hard to like sometimes. I think she forgets that I haven't been in this business as long as she has. Oh well, the customers are nice too. The ladies that work upstairs sometimes ask me to come up and have coffee with them in the morning. Well, I guess, Daddy, that I'd better close this and stick it in the mailbox so you will get it before next year. So I'll talk to you later, okay?
That's good. So this is a room that was next to it. I want to make sure.
This is now storage for the hardware shop. You can see he's got all of his paint and supplies down here.
When we get back upstairs, let's ask him if this was there at the time. What was it? What was here? When he, in his little storage area?
This was the toy area.
Oh, that's right. He said this was the toy area.
This was where the toys were kept.
And there's another door right here.
Which leads to a very small room.
Yeah, it's not a... Well, there's a whole bunch of room back there.
This leads the whole length.
Again?
Yep.
Okay, so there's really 4 sets of rooms down here. And I don't know what she was working in, but this goes all the way down to the end too. And
it goes behind the cemented wall.
So there's a center room, and then 2 other access points that go. Are you sure that goes all the way to where we were just at?
Yeah, it goes to where the wall was cemented.
Oh, but it doesn't go into that.
It does not go into the room.
Okay, so this is a separate room.
Yeah.
But someone could have hidden here very easily.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of room.
You can see how far back.
It's not
There's
just
some
one
old
room.
posters down there.
Yeah.
You want me to get some footage down there?
Yeah, go ahead and see what that wall is. Oh my God, look at the action-packed G.I. Joe. Careful. Oh. Yeah, see what you see back there. It looks like there's some new, what's that sign on there say?
Child's Auto Coaster Wagons.
Get a picture of that because that's old.
This is it's an old sliding door.
And is it open?
There's even more back here. This is the next door neighbor's boiler. That's what they cemented and closed off. There's a cement wall here that blocks this boiler from that boiler.
Oh.
Yeah, there's another boiler.
Any access to get out of that room except for this way? Oh, that phone booth is so...
No, there's no way to get out.
All right, so this is closed in, there would be no way to get through there right now. I don't see where they, it's a separate room, it would have been. All right. So
This is creepy.
yeah, I know. The phone just rang again and it gave me a chill. What time is it?
Hold on, let me get around these.
And then we're gonna go up the stair.
I gotta get my purse and stuff.
All right. So basically that's the room, we have 2 rooms. I wanna know if this was here at the time or he dug this out, this extra storage room.
Because they took care to lacquer over the cement and turn it into a neat looking entrance, so.
This is what we're talking about right here.
Yeah, you can see it was just hammered out of the wall.
So I need to ask him that, I need to ask him about the paint, and then, that's it, I think, right?
Yep, I'll get my purse and
Oh, lights, where do I turn them off?
he'll turn them off.
Okay.
He turned them on.
All right. All right, so this is we're not going down, this is the steps. So it's those steps. By the way. So we're going up the stairs. Lisa, be careful, it's steep. This is another set of entrance. We're coming out into the hardware store in a different place than we came. Where are the stairs we took? Over there?
Yes.
So that's the center, and that's the very left side. That's right up next to the bar. Okay.
And under
That's
these
the
stairs,
office,
is where we went in.
and that's the office up there, I imagine.
Right.
Get a big
Over here is where we originally went in. Underneath the stairs that lead up to the office.
Far too brutal for a random attack or a robbery.
Somebody was pretty angry at this person.
So detectives looked into those closest to Janette and discovered that she and her husband, Alvin, were getting a divorce.
It's pretty well known that the husband, Janette's husband, and her were not together at that point.
It was even discovered that Alvin Roberson was seeing another woman. Still, detectives at the time were eventually able to rule out Alvin and his then-girlfriend as suspects. Meanwhile, in Reed City, bizarre rumors started to swirl. Was there more to Janette Roberson than people knew?
There's no indication that she was doing anything, outside the ordinary other than, just a normal hometown girl that was, having some issues at home. Could it have been somebody with an infatuation with her? Yes. Is that a possibility? Yes.
Months, years, decades passed, and still, to this day, no arrests, no charges, not even a suspect.
There is no true suspect at this point.
And then there was that other thing. A man coming down to the basement in the days leading up to her brutal murder. She pointed this mystery man out to a friend who was visiting her in the pet department one day. "That's him," she told her friend. The man came halfway down the stairs, saw that she had a customer, and then turned and went back up the stairs. Janette had already told her friend about the man and how he'd been coming in, making her uncomfortable, even so far as appearing directly behind her in the back room one day, an area only meant for employees, startling her when she had turned around. This man was described as having dark hair, glasses that were square, she called them old-fashioned, and he was in his late 30s or 40s. From news accounts, it was clear that they knew about this someone back then, but as far as we know, this mystery man has never been identified by name. Certainly not publicly. Police may know who he is, though. In a news article after the murder, the county prosecutor said, "We are urging anyone who may have seen someone giving Mrs. Roberson a hard time or bothering her in any way prior to her death to call the state police post in Reed City." He added, "Someone may have even heard something between Janette and her assailant that would be extremely beneficial to us." Is the mystery man her killer? Or is it just a coincidence that there was another man, in addition to the killer, who found himself drawn down to that basement? Drawn to the sweet 27-year-old mother of two, practicing Jehovah's Witness, wife, sister, friend, and daughter. It's important to this story that you understand the remoteness of that basement. It's not a place that someone would just randomly find themselves in. Off the beaten path perfectly describes a pet store in the dreary basement of a hardware/everything store in a small town with a population around 2,500 at the time. What is known is that there was a lot of space above and below the main street level of the gamble store, where someone who'd done something truly despicable could have hidden for some amount of time before they made themselves presentable enough to continue the charade among the employees and customers before they fled to safety. It makes me sad to think that someone would spend their last moments back there in that back room. It was dark back there, cold. The floor was dirty. There were cages with birds hanging in the back room. Birdseed scattered all over. You have to wonder how long he was back there with her, with the amount of damage done. And if any customers came in between and he was stuck back there with her, trying to keep her quiet, if she was conscious at all. Does he think about it? About leaving her there, partially clad, as the first news accounts describe, in that cold basement, with the bird she loved looking down at her? If only they could have spoken, we'd know. January 19th, 1983. Janette would have shown up, just like the rest of the employees, bright and early when the store opened that day. It was a Wednesday and a bit warmer than usual for that time of year in Michigan. It was a delivery day, so employees would spend the day unloading the truck and then emptying the totes of product onto the shelves. Carl Johnson came up to Gamble's between 10 and 11 to drop off some baby gerbils he was selling to Janette. The muffler on his car was broken, so a friend, Tom Hawkins, drove him up there. Carl said he waited about 15 minutes in the basement, and when Janette didn't show up, he went upstairs and asked the manager when she would be back. The manager informed him that her husband, Alvin, had already been to the store a couple times that day, and that she might have gone home with him for lunch. Carl then left, and later that day his wife would return with the gerbils. Next was Gene Johnson, who says he was in around 11:30. He ran into Janette around the center of the store, where she had been walking from the back up toward him. "Can I help you?" she asked. Gene had never met her, and he was a regular, so he figured she was the new clerk for the pet department. He hadn't been down there since Dave Ingalls, the store owner, was putting it together. "I know this store better than you," he teased, and then asked, "Where is everyone?" "Unloading the truck," she told him. Gene was the director of maintenance at the hospital in Reed City at the time of the murder. He frequented the store to get supplies. They would write out a receipt, and he would stick it on the spike for hospital billing. He knew his way around the store. Gene told her that he could find what he needed, and he said Janette told him she had something to take care of downstairs, and she proceeded down to the pet department. Gene says he remembered seeing employees unloading the truck into both back doors, the Gamble side and the expanded into men's store side. He said he wasn't in the store long, maybe 10 minutes. Next were a couple of young teens who felt they'd been in the store in the early afternoon, though they couldn't pinpoint the exact time all these years later. They were the only other customers that I communicated with who had seen Janette that day, and it sounds as though they may have been the last ones to see her. They said they walked down into the basement, and it was quiet. Nobody else was there. They didn't hear anyone else in the back room. No sound except the humming of the tanks and the bubble machines. Janette walked through the doorway into the display room and left the door to the back room open behind her. Neither teen recalls hearing or seeing anyone else back there with her, or in the adjoining basement through the rough-cut hole in the old men's store side. Janette asked them if they needed any help, and they replied that they were just looking. Later, during their interview, the police would be most interested in what they remembered about the layout of the basement, even having them sketch out the positions of things, particularly the locations of the doors. One teen remembered the light on in the adjoining room and the tarp hanging over the hole, and thinking that the owners were working on that room. The other one thought he may have seen a table saw on that side. They were only there about 5 or 10 minutes, and one of the teens told me that he was particularly struck by how Janette treated them like adults, rather than following them around the store like many of the other clerks in the local businesses did. Blanche says she came in around 1 o'clock and went downstairs looking for a product called Ick. Something to keep her fish tank from getting yucky is how she described it. She went down into the pet department, but found nobody there. She says she looked around for a bit, she thinks maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and there were no other customers down there when she went down, but she did recall seeing a blue tarp hanging in that doorway-sized area between the two basements. Finally, she went upstairs and said to one of the clerks, "You know, it'd be nice if there was someone downstairs to ring people up." The associate she spoke to said, "Maybe she's still at lunch." She said that she may have left the store and shopped elsewhere on Upton Street that day because she ran into her boss at some point across the street near the bakery, and he asked her what was going on over at Gamble's. Apparently, some commotion caught his eye, and she thought it could have been an ambulance. If that were the case, she would have had to have come in later than the next two women, because the ambulance didn't show up till around 4. Whichever the case, Blanche never got her ick. Venus and Jan were sisters-in-law who were shopping for items for a new 50-gallon tank. Their recollection is of arriving at Gamble's between 2 and 3 o'clock and being there for quite some time, maybe as long as an hour. They had 2 little boys with them, ages 2 and 3 at the time, and they browsed around looking at all the fish and supplies. Jan had even peeked into the back room where Janette was killed, but hadn't seen anything. Later, when they were interviewed by police, they were told that it was a good thing she didn't go back there. They believed that there was a possibility the killer could have either been back there at the time or had already gone and left the battered and bloody Janette just inside. At some point, the woman realized that nobody had come down to help them. Jan said that she had a vague recollection of a male customer coming down at some point, looking for the cashier and saying, "There's nobody down here?" Jan told him no, and he went back upstairs. After having picked out all of the items they wanted, with no one there to ring them up, Jan went upstairs to look for a clerk. The little boys followed her up the stairs, leaving Venus down there alone. She thinks she was down there for about 10 minutes by herself, because Jan had taken the boys to the bathroom while she was up there. When Jan came back downstairs, a clerk came with her, and it was likely Angie based on the description. She rang up their items. Jan doesn't recall her calling out for Janette at all or looking for her. Based on the news excerpt from right after the murder, police theorized that Venus and Jan had been there at a critical point in the timeline. From the Pioneer newspaper. Police are looking for 2 women who purchased fish equipment and may have witnessed the crime. The paper went on to add, the women were not suspects, but police feel they may have important information concerning the bizarre death. Jan told me that when the woman came back downstairs to ring up her items, suddenly there were a bunch of customers down there, and they were all together. She said that she remembered thinking, "Wow, nobody down here this whole time, and suddenly there's a whole bunch of customers." I asked her if they could have been employees, and she said no. I just figured maybe work had just let out and everybody was coming in, and it was just a busy time at the store. This makes sense because the next group of people to come in the store were all there when Janette was found. Elke was the wife of Carl, who had been in earlier with the gerbils, and she came back with them. Mark Truman came in with his mother after school to get a battery for his car. The Kookers were both teachers who'd just gotten off work and stopped in before going home. and the Thorpes were a couple with their kids who came in with a friend. According to Elke, she was in the store a long time that day, too. She went up and down the stairs, waiting a long time without seeing Janette, but she went upstairs and found the first employee she saw and asked where Janette was. She was told that maybe Janette was still at lunch. Elke went back downstairs thinking, this is a really long lunch. She doesn't recall ever seeing any other customers in the pet department while she was down there. Mark Truman and his mother ended up at the register at some point, and he vividly remembers the day because he had been unable to drive to school due to the car battery not working, and he was eager to replace it. While they had shopped, his mom had picked out some Job plant spikes. Mark recalls that Angie was looking up the battery type for his car in a book when a male employee, who he thought was the owner, came up to Angie and told her to go downstairs and look for Janette. Also standing near the register area at this time were the Cookers. They recall hearing someone say, well, her coat is here. So now everyone's wondering where Janette is, customers and employees, and a male employee has just sent Angie back downstairs to look for her. Interestingly, Mark remembers that nobody ever finished looking up the battery. He thinks the male employee went back upstairs after sending Angie to find Janette. Maybe she didn't hear you, Elke recalled Angie saying as they both walked toward the back room door. Elke was just behind Angie when the door opened, and she said she didn't even have to go all the way in. All I could see was her red hair. It was red, bloody. And her hair used to be so beautiful, almost white. Mark remembers Angie coming back up the stairs looking white as a ghost and saying, she's downstairs. Flossie remembered her bent over at the waist, unable to speak, just pointing at the stairs. John, Angie's having a heart attack, Flossie screamed. She said John came running down the stairs from the office, taking them two at a time. She said he went downstairs and quickly came back up and said, lock all the doors. Mrs. Cooker described Angie as distraught. She also said that it only occurred to her later that evening, once they got home, that she didn't remember anyone checking the store to see if the killer was inside with them before they locked the doors. Mark remembered a man going downstairs and coming back up pretty quickly and saying, there's nothing we can do for her now. He said that man then called police. It isn't clear if Mark saw John, the manager, or Dave, the store owner. But he said the man that went downstairs was the same man that told Angie to go down and look for Janette. But time becomes compressed in situations like this, and scenarios overlap when there's confusion. Add 3 decades to these memories, and it's fair to say some of the recollections are likely a bit off. Mrs. Thorpe recalls being downstairs somewhere during this time, seeing the door to the back room ajar, and being told everyone needed to leave the pet department. If that's the case, Janette had already been found. Thomas Hawkins, who Elke's husband thinks was there because he drove her back that day with the gerbils, was one of the people listed in the police report as having been in the back room near the body, so he was milling around down in the pet department after she was discovered too. Mark and his mom left before police even arrived. He said the manager was telling people to leave, and that it happened so fast, some of the customers filtered over next door to the Ben Franklin. In all the commotion, his mother left the gamble store still clutching the Job plant spikes and had to go back another day to pay for them. There was a nurse that wandered in sometime around when Janette was discovered because she was passing by and thought she could provide assistance. She is listed in the Michigan State Police report, along with Thomas Hawkins, as having been one of the persons who entered the immediate area where the body was found. There was also a city police officer who had visited as a store patron twice that day, according to Detective Pratt. This is the same officer who ended up back at the scene later, despite having been suspended at the time, and would later meet the evidence technician at the door and be the one to show him down to the scene. I was only able to recreate the timeline based on people who could remember when they were there and were willing to share that information with me.
It's 1600 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon is when I took over the chair as far as dispatch goes. We're always 15 minutes early so that everything can be explained to us, what's going on, to get caught up before, your actual shift starts. I took over the chair, sat down behind the radios. I also had to do dispatching. So back then it was a dispatch and a correctional officer type situation. So, but I sat down behind the chair, and the minute my tail end hit that chair, the phone rang. At that point in time, the person on the other end says, "I think there's been a murder in the basement of Gamble's in the pet store." I said, "They're going, what?" And they repeated it. At that point in time, I looked at the two officers that were there with me, and I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was Davis and Oyster, but I'm not totally positive. And I looked at those two officers, and I told them what was going on. They ran out the door and took off toward Gamble's. At that point in time, I contacted the sheriff, which he lived in the sheriff's department in apartments in the back. I contacted him. He came up and told me to dispatch it as a heart attack. That's one thing I do remember now. So I dispatched EMS out as a possible heart attack at Gamble's store. Then, as everything was progressing, I got a hold of state, let them know what was going on. They contacted the city. The city was on their way down there. So we had county, city, and state. And then eventually the detectives came down, and the sheriff then took off, and he went on down there. And then I just typed in everything and monitored everything that was going on over the radios from that point.
Do you know who it was that called you from Gamble's?
I to this day don't really remember.
Other than it was,
I don't know if it was. I'm pretty sure it wasn't Flossie.
you don't know if it was a male or female?
Yeah, I don't remember, Jenny. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I'd rather you say you don't remember if you don't, because that's, we don't want to guess. It's better we don't know,
Right.
All right,
Right.
so all we know is that a call came in and I remember that Flossie was telling me that Angie she actually did think Angie was having a heart attack, just the way she looked when she came from upstairs. So initially I thought, well, maybe that's how a heart attack call came, because maybe someone thought she was having a heart attack and called, That's what the confusion was for me until I spoke to you about it. So basically all we know is that someone made the call from there. We're not sure who it was. And then after that, were there any other calls associated with that scene that came in that day?
No.
Nothing else.
No. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. They had seen a guy run out of the store with an army jacket and was heading toward the bus depot.
Okay, and who was it that saw that? Do you know?
I don't know.
So
that was brought up to the officers down there. The only thing that came back to me was that they're en route to stop the bus.
Okay, so someone must have seen or thought that the person that exited that store was suspicious enough that they chased him down and got him off the bus. And am I right in assuming this was someone, once they talked to them, they were ruled out?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me, what independent knowledge do you have of above the men's store side? I believe you had told me there were apartments back then. Is that correct?
Correct. There's an apartment right straight above the Gamble store. It's the whole top floor of the Gamble store is the actual apartment.
Is it only one apartment or multiple apartments?
It's only one apartment up there, and it's right up there by the furniture. You go through the furniture, and there's the apartment.
Okay.
The furniture's only the front.
I see.
Then toward the back, it's divided. It's like it's divided in half on the store of lower and upper, and then that upper half is divided in half again. So that the front part of it was furniture, and when you went into the apartments, because I've been up there a couple of times, when you go through to the apartment, you had to weed your way down through like a little maze to get through the furniture to get back to the apartment.
All right, and so it wasn't that big of an apartment then?
No, it was big enough. It had a kitchenette, a living room, and I think it's 2 bedroom. They're small,
Yeah.
but there's like 2 bedrooms, a kitchenette, and a living room.
And did anyone live up there at the time, do you know?
I can't really. It's. I'm thinking Dave's brother lived up there, but I'm not positive.
But you do know there was an apartment up there at the time. It existed up there.
Yeah, and it still exists to this day.
All right, so then you're saying that the apartment that existed on the Gamble side was back behind the furniture section, that you'd walk through the furniture section to get to that.
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk about how dispatching worked back in the 1980s. So who did Osceola County dispatch for? Was it for the Reed City PD, the state police, EMTs? Who were you responsible for dispatching?
The sheriff's department, number one, all the deputies. The fire, county fire and city fire. EMS, and then also, like your weather alert, your tornado sirens and stuff like that. Yeah, state police were dispatching city. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We had a city line that we could talk to the city by, through the radios. There's a totally different frequency.
Okay.
So the city and the state police were on the same frequency. They would talk to each other. They would do each other's dispatching back and forth. While we handled the other aspects of the fire and all that.
I see. Okay, so the state would be dispatching city on a different frequency that if for any reason you wanted to contact city, you would be doing that on a different frequency.
Correct.
And back then there was no 911, is that right, in 1983?
Right, it was just you dial in the sheriff's department. If you need ambulance or whatever the case might be, it all came into the sheriff's department on just a regular 832 number.
Now, with respect to Janette's, do you believe that county, you were the very first call that went out from Gamble's to anyone?
Yeah, we were the very, very first ones to respond because I was sitting in a chair and 2 officers were already in the sheriff's department at the time. So all I did was spin around and look right at them and say, bingo, this is what we got, and away they went. They dashed out the door and hauled butt down there. Then at that point in time, I contacted the other authorities that needed to go.
I wanted to ask you, as far as scanners, talk to me about how prevalent they were in just the general public. Did just like your neighbors, would they have a scanner? Would a lot? Would half the how prevalent were they at the time?
Everybody had a Bearcat scanner. That was the biggest thing back then. Programmable Bearcat scanner. First thing that ever come out, and everybody got it so that they could program every call, everything, ambulance, fire, city, state, you name it, they could put it on there.
And what was just as someone who has never even heard one before, what was that about? Was it just fun to listen to?
Yeah, everybody just kind of liked to listen to it.
Just a couple notes. Ray Haight says he thought the 2 deputies at the sheriff's department right there next to him that day, when the call came in, were Deputies Davis and Oyster. I've spoken to Chuck Davis, who is now the Reed City Police Chief, and he was not on duty that day. Deputy Oyster was, as was Deputy Kingsbury, so it was most likely those 2, as both are mentioned in the reports as having been at the scene, along with Sheriff Needham. Osceola County Detective James Southworth, who showed up because he was driving by and saw the ambulance, and decided to go in and see what was happening. He had to have arrived before the deputies from Osceola County, though, because his report says that after going downstairs, witnessing the scene, and subsequently having it turned over to him by Officer Finkbeiner, he went outside to the patrol unit and radioed the sheriff's department to notify Sheriff Needham, Reed City Police Chief Philip Rathbun, Deputy Tom Kingsbury, Northern County Evidence Service, and Prosecutor Telasky. Southworth's report says Detective Pratt arrived a few minutes later, although Detective Pratt told me when I interviewed him that he arrived about an hour after Janette was found. He only came to the scene once Prosecutor Telasky arrived and called him. As you heard from Ray, the dispatcher, he was clear on his deputies running out that door as soon as the call came in from Gamble's. Then he called the state police post, who would have been the ones to dispatch Reed City PD. Also, according to Gary McGee, the EMT, when they rolled up at 4:08, Officer Finkbeiner was standing outside the gamble store, holding the door open and shooing customers from the store. It makes you wonder if Officer Finkbeiner thought he was responding to a heart attack as well, because clearing a scene, if in fact you thought you were responding to a heart attack, would be a reasonable response. His report says that he responded to the Sheriff's Department radio dispatch. Finkbeiner's report says he entered the building with the EMTs, and Gary McGee did say that Finkbeiner led him down to the basement. The reason why that timeline concerns me is because of something else that's in the report later. In 1985, 2 years after the murder, when two different detectives, Albright and Vincent, are assigned to the case to go back over it with a couple sets of fresh eyes, they contacted Janette's mother, Marion Fisher, and she was re-interviewed, quote, in reference to how she was advised of the death of her daughter. She said that she was working at the city building on the day of the murder, and at approximately 3:45 to 4 o'clock, Officer Larry Finkbeiner of the Reed City Police Department came to the city building and told her that Janette was dead, that an incident happened at the gamble store. Someone's timing is a bit off, because Janette wasn't even found until 3:50, and according to Finkbeiner's own report, he was busy at that time leading EMTs into the store. They didn't even arrive until 4:08. He awaited their assessment, then turned the scene over to Detective Southworth, and it would have had to have been subsequent to that he went down the street to the city building. The city building was just down Upton Street a few blocks, but he would have had to have gotten there quite a bit later than Marion's account, or else the timing on his report is off. It is of note that his report says nothing about leaving the scene and going down to the city building to notify Marion Fisher. One of the problems with this case that I feel like I've realized now that I'm this far in is that a lot of people in town have a very specific idea of what they think happened, and they're not really they don't have any more room in their head for other possibilities. And if all of those are conspiracy theories, or if they're just not the right suspect, or if they think the person has died, because a lot of people that are in and around law enforcement, specifically associated with Osceola County, have told me, oh, I was told that the person's dead already. And I said, well, I don't think they'd be sending in evidence to be retested if they believe the perpetrator was dead. We don't have those kind of resources out here to be doing more DNA testing and stuff. So that's kind of the problem, and why I wanted to keep this going with the podcast, because there's so many misconceptions out there. And if people are thinking one thing and they don't realize, no, that's not a possibility, direct your attention this way, pay attention to what was going on that day, who you might have seen, what they might have done, anyone that was suspicious. That's what I want people to focus on, not focusing on the rich guy that owned some big business in town that only knew her because he owned a business that she worked for a couple months, or no, it's not this person, or it's not the husband, he's been ruled out. So don't look at those things. Let's look at the actual things, you know?
Right. Look at all the facts, put the facts together, and see what you can come up with.
Exactly. And so that's what we're doing. Stay tuned.